Hi everyone, welcome back to Adrian's Digital Basement. For today's video, I'm going to show you how I service these Apple disk drives. They're made by Sony and they're found in the Mac Plus all the way through the very later Color Macs, and they're also used externally on the Apple II line like the Apple II GS. So let's get right to it. The drive on the right is the one we're going to be servicing today. A friend of mine gave this drive to me and it's in unknown condition. I'm actually not even sure if it works, but I know it's filthy and very gummed up. Now the one on the right is the same exact drive, but it's inside the metal case. Now often when you take these out of your Mac, it might be in a case like this that just sort of protects it. So all you do is you remove the 4 screws and you take that out, and this is what it looks like inside. Personally, whenever I clean a drive, I usually put a note on it just to let me know that I've done it. This one also has epoxy on the eject motor, and the reason for that is this is the eject motor, and when I took it off to replace the gear inside that had stripped, there's a little clip that holds it on, and we'll show that to you in a second. It snapped off, and I had to use some JB Weld to kind of glue it all back together so it works. So all of these drives are really old at this point, and they have various lubrication points that have all probably gotten gummed up and hard over time. And I recommend that at this point, if you haven't already taken apart this drive and cleaned it, you should do that now. Now, one way to know that the drive really needs cleaning is when you put the disk inside and it goes in with a really horrible slow sound to it. Listen. See, that was not right. And now, if I take this disk and I put it in this other drive here, or the one that I've cleaned, watch how it should sound. See that nice solid clunk sound? That is the correct operational sound for these drives. Listen again. So if your drive's not doing that when you put it in, doesn't make a nice solid clunk, it definitely needs to be lubricated. Putting the same disk in here again. I mean, it's barely going down there. I had to give it a little help. There's no way that this drive would work in this state right now. All right, let's put this drive aside for a second and let's look at what I use to service these disk drives. First off, I use a little tub like this. It's basically so I can put the disk drive in it as I take it apart and clean the parts. For cleaning, I typically use Windex, which is just sort of a soapy ammonia-based cleaner, and some 99% isopropyl alcohol. Disassembling the disk drive is pretty easy, but once you start taking it apart, there are these little plastic clips which you need to take off, and I personally use this little plastic kind of pry tool as a way to get those off. Now what I did is I took a file and I notched the bottom of this there, and that allows me to kind of get under them and pop them off. For nice cleaning with these 2 bottles of liquid here, of course I just use an old toothbrush. For reapplication of lubricant, I use Q-tip, and then for all the metal on metal contact points, I use white lithium grease. You can find this pretty easily at any hardware store, and it works great. It lasts a long time. Now, one thing to keep in mind, I personally don't recommend using this on any plastic parts, so only use this on the metal on metal contact areas. And then finally, I use a little bit of silicone. This is a liquid type. You see it inside there. And I bought these off of Amazon. These are little squeezy bottles that have a little metal nozzle, and then essentially you can very accurately put a drop of this where you need to. But silicone and white lithium grease, so these are the 2 lubricants I use for the disk drive. Alright, so we want to start taking this apart. First off, we need to remove this top metal part. Now if we take a floppy disk and you put it in, you'll notice that as you push it in, this little lever moves to the side there, and right here this catches on the front of the disk and starts moving to the side. And this allows the top mechanism to slide down into the lower engaged position, which on this drive is really not working well. But right now, there we go. Now it's in the lower position, and you see it kind of does this. So what we need to do is we need to get the mechanism into the lower position, but without the floppy disk in there. The way you do that is by moving this little arm here, and this is what catches on the disk. So if you watch here, when I move this to the side, okay, and it's so slow, but there we go. I slid this. This is the eject bar here. Now this is all in the lower position. There's no disc in there. The disc is removed, but it's down as if it had the disc in there. So the first thing we need to do is disconnect these springs here. Now you can use needle nose, although I don't really recommend it. I just recommend you use your fingers and you just unhook them. There's a little metal hook there on the bottom, and now the screw is released, and there's one on each side. So we unhook that, there and there. Over here is the read-write head, and you see this little plastic piece, but we have to slide this plastic piece off. And it's hard to do this with the camera view, but you just sort of lift this little tab here, and you just slide it over. So there it is, it just came off. That's what raises up the head right there on this little bar as this drive mechanism comes up when you eject, because it needs to take the head off the disc so it doesn't get caught. Now with the screws released and that mechanism off, we can take this top piece off. And it rides in the track here and on the back side. You have to kind of move the eject mechanism a little bit, and that's this manual arm right here, just to the right position. It's kind of a little fiddly, so just fiddle with it. It was catching on the head a little bit there, so watch out that it doesn't catch too much. But there we go, that's off. So I'm gonna put this inside the tub here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna soak this in some IPA first of all to really start to break down the grease. And I take the toothbrush and I just start gently scrubbing it. On the sides here with these little metal pegs, these are what we're riding inside those slots. Now you might be wondering, I'm using IPA, and why do I talk about using Windex as well? Well, I find that the soap in the Windex actually really helps. The IPA does a good job, but the Windex really gets a lot of the grease out of there. You can push down on this part here. It's moving a lot smoother than it was. I'm just going to spray this and set it aside. We'll let it soak a little more. We'll get back to the main disk drive. There are more sliding parts, and what still is left is this lower area here, and this is the eject button there. Well, we got to take this off because there's a bunch of grease underneath it, and it's really slow and crusty as well. Now before I remove this, I'm going to take this eject motor off. Now it's got a screw here and a screw right there. You need to use a medium Phillips to get these off. Once those are off, the eject mechanism just lifts straight out of the drive, and then there's a power connector right there which you pull off like that. So remember I said that you shouldn't blow the dust out of this thing while the eject motor is in? Now there's a reason for that. So if you flip the motor over, under here, under this metal cover, is a little gear set. And there's the motor right here, this silver thing, and it drives several gears, and that eventually it's a reduction gear and it gets to this eject mechanism. Under there is one of those gears that strips all the time. So essentially when this eject gear starts to spin, the little circuit board here has some metal contacts that ensure that it goes a full 360 degrees and always stops back in this position. There's a little micro switch right here on the drive that when the disc lifts off of it, the drive says, oh, okay, I'm finished ejecting, and it will cut power to this little eject motor. But what happens is with this circuit board is that maintains the connection and it ensures a full 360 degree turn of this gear. Now if dust or dirt gets inside of here, what happens is this will turn partially and then just stop. So the symptom will be you fixed and cleaned up your drive and you go to eject it from the computer and it goes brr, and it just sort of stops halfway. And worse is if you manually eject it by pushing the eject button. When you go to put the disc back in, because the whole mechanism is partially ejected, it will not register a disc getting put in it at all. Okay, so on this drive, there are these 4 little plastic rings here, and that's what holds this lower plate on, and we gotta get those off. They're very difficult to take off, and again, that's why I made this little tool. And even with this tool, it's still a bit of a pain, but I kind of get it under one of them, and I put my finger on it because these have a tendency to really go flying. And there we go, we got one off. Alright, all 4 are off, and since the eject motor is off, this just lifts straight off the drive. Now we can really see some serious crusty action going on underneath here. So these are the lubricant points there, and also here, and here, and here, there, and there. And it's really crusty. I'm going to hit it with some IPA, and we're going to start scrubbing. Well, at this point we got to give our attention to the really disgusting looking disk drive. So I noticed there's actually a little bit of corrosion right here. So this thing has seen a little bit of liquid, I guess, but I'm just going to carefully clean this with some IPA. Just spray that on there so I can get this grease off. Ugh. That's where you'll need a good number of these cotton swabs here to get this crusty crap off of here. It's really a pain to disassemble these drives fully. So I recommend for this lower section, you just manually clean this stuff. So of course the eject motor's gone, so I'm going to hit this with compressed air. So there's a little bit of corrosion right there, and there's a little bit of corrosion right there. All right, a little strip of sandpaper, just a little tiny one. Let's see if this makes any difference at all. All right, that looks a bit better, so let's just get a little IPA, clean this up. So what I have here is a little Rust-Oleum rust reformer. This sort of converts rust from a rusty color just to black. Not sticking super well to that. There's obviously some kind of coating on this, but I'm just dabbing it on. You can put in the comments if you think this is a silly exercise or this was actually going to work. Oh, incidentally, there was a little tiny spot right there and right there. This is on the bottom plate. The little bit of the corrosion had made its way onto this, so I dried that off and just dabbed that on too. Okay, next we got to clean up the head assembly here. So obviously we can clean the heads with some IPA, so I'll do that first. On there. Make sure you're using a clean one, and you very gently clean the heads. They move around, so you do not want to push on them too hard. Oh, that's kind of crusty. Some crap came off there. And you got to get the top head too. So the way I do that is just tilt it up. Just carefully clean those. Now I also have a cleaning floppy which I will use later. Now I'm going to use the IPA on here just to clean off the little rod. And then the little screw thing here, this is, head moves back and forth on this. There's a little stepper motor here, so look at that black. I'm going to spray a little bit of IPA onto a paper towel. Clean these upright parts here. Okay, at the front of the drive there are two micro switches. One right here, one there. One senses that the disc is down, is actually inserted into the drive, and the other one is the write protect tab. High density drives will actually have three. There'll be a high density detect one, write protect, and then a disc one. I'm just going to spray a little deoxit onto these, into the micro switch there. Just exercise them a few times. That just make sure those are working correctly. Alright, what's next is to lubricate the screw and the sliding bar because we clean those off with alcohol. I'm going to use silicone on those. I'm just going to apply a little bit right onto the jack screw. Dropped. And a little bit onto the rod. Then I will use cotton swab, spread it around, and the same on this jack screw thing here. Alright, so everything is ready to go back together at this point. So before we reinstall this, we need to add the lubricant. So what I'm going to do is get the white lithium grease. I'm going to put a little bit on the cotton swab, like that. If you look here at the bottom plate, there are little nubs right here, here, and there. There's 4 of them, and they ride on this metal, there, and there. So if I just sort of put a dab of this right on there, try not to put too much, but I don't know how much it really matters. So those 4 spots, and then I'll add a little bit more. I put a little bit on these 4 things right here, there, and there. And now if we take this, and we put it on here, we slide it back and forth, now it's sliding so much smoother than it was originally. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this little paper towel, and I'm going to dab any extra on these 4 posts here. There's the 4 little circle things. Now I don't really have a trick to put these on. You just have to kind of push them down over these little posts. And if you have fingernails, use those. If you don't, a little screwdriver might help. So they click into place. I just got one on. There we go. Often what I do is I'm just going to add a little bit of grease here. So this is basically underneath those 4 little things. Now I did just notice the corner of this drive is bent in. It should be like this, and you see this corner is sort of angled that way. Probably this drive was dropped at some point. So I am going to take a needle nose, just straighten that out. Next is we need to reinstall the top piece here. So this is the back of the drive back here, front of the drive. And the way I find the easiest way to get this on is there's a little like kind of a tooth right here. So you slide this in first on this side like that. And then actually, yeah, that's it. It's in. So you just sort of get it on one side, but you might have to like jiggle the eject mechanism a little bit. So see, it's opening and closing the eject right now. Now the springs aren't connected, so of course it doesn't have that spring tension. Now that that's done, we got to get these little screws on. Now they're easy to take off using your fingers, but I find the easiest way to get them back on is with a pick like this. You sort of stretch them down and push it off the pick onto the little hook perch thingy, the thing that the hook goes onto. So that one is now on. Now I'll do it again on this side. And then you get it down under the hook and push it off the pick. See, it snaps back down now. So that's like as if we were inserting a floppy disk. Okay, to slide this on, lift the head up slightly and just slide this back into place. So it's currently lifting the head up on one side right by this little lever there. So now I'm going to take some of this white lithium grease again. We're going to put it on the cotton swab and we're going to lubricate the side of the drive. We haven't lubricated right here and right here. So I like to just sort of goop this on a little bit. There and there. Do this on both sides. So these little pegs ride down in these channels. So now it's lubricated on that side, and we do the same right here. Alright, so lubricant there. So if I push the drive mechanism down, see it all slides in that track there. See this part here? Same on this side. Okay, time for a test. So make sure the drive is ejected. I'm going to stick this disc in there. Remember when I put it in, it didn't even really go down. Now it should snap down without any issue. Look at that. That is how it should sound. There's a little bit more lubricant I like to do. This little mechanism here, this whole little flippy thing, I like to lubricate that. And I don't like to use the lithium grease. It's kind of thick. So I just add a drop, just a little ever so slight amount of the silicone on there. And we just exercise that. So just move that back and forth there. Kind of moves the lubricant around. And then what I do is I'll take a paper towel and I'll wipe up, dab up any extra. A little bit more lubricant is needed, and I will use the lithium grease for this. And it's right here on this slide point, right there and right there. So we just put a little bit of this in there, a little bit in there. A little bit more right here. That's a spot that actually touches. And I'm going to add the ever so slightest amount of the silicone lubricant there, because that's a rotation point as well. Well, that leaves us with the very delicate eject motor mechanism. I haven't even touched this yet. There's a little bit of the crusty old lubricant on there. So let's use IPA. Try to get that off. And that thing rides down here in this circle area, and there's a little bit of the crusty lubricant on there too, so we'll just get that off. So since I don't think this thing is ruined or broken, I'm just going to put this back in as is and we'll see how it goes. So I'll put a little bit of the lithium grease on it right there on the bearing surface. Try not to get it on the gear. Okay, and we're going to reinstall the power connector here for the eject motor. And we're going to just gently lay that down in there. We're gonna reinstall the screws. It will not operate without the screws, so put those in. Don't torque them too tightly. There we go, just enough so the eject motor sits in there correctly. All right, and there is one service disk drive. Let's just put the disk in, make sure it goes in. Yep. So it's ready for testing. Okay, I have a Mac SE, and here's the floppy drive for testing. So let's plug this in the back. I think there's a bootable hard drive in here. Let's turn this on. I think the hard drive's not working. Oh, there we go, it's spun up. Oh, that's noisy too. So at least the head assembly moved into the correct position. Let's put a disk in there and just see what happens. This disk is not formatted for Macintosh. It should read it, fail, and eject. Oh, okay. Computer's booting anyways. Okay, let's hit eject. See if it comes out. Didn't even attempt to eject. Let's take this eject motor off, see what's going on. So the cabling looks good on it. Solder joints on the top look fine as well. But at the minimum, I'm just gonna plug this back in. Okay, so I'm just gonna let it hang off the back there. Let's turn the computer back on and put the disk back in. Yep, so it's not even trying to eject. So I'm gonna eject it myself once the drive stops spinning. All right, so this is a bootable disk for the Mac SE. I tested it on another drive. And let's see if this drive even reads disks properly. Ah, good sign right there, it's booting. So it's cool that we know that this drive works. So there's either a problem with this eject motor itself, or there's a problem with the circuit board, the logic board on this drive here that's preventing it from ejecting. I have another one right here. I took off a different drive and I know this one is good because it works perfectly on the other drive. So let's plug it in. I'm just gonna lay it over to the side there and we should see that spin pull. Okay, so that worked. Did you guys see that? So this is the one that's not working and it doesn't even attempt to eject. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pop the gear set cover off. We're gonna look inside. Maybe it's stripped and jammed. So this little thing here, you have to bend back and flip the cover off. And it's best just to do it with your hands. If you try to use tools to do it, it's gonna snap. And then that comes off like that. And then you can lift one of the gears straight out of there, just like that. And now this gear here is gonna turn freely. So if you ever need to adjust this like it's stuck in a weird position, you just take that cover off and then you align it to straight ahead. So this here is the gear that strips constantly on these machines. And it looks pretty screwy. In fact, I'm unable to turn this. Oh, there we go. It's turning now. So there's definitely some schmutz stuck in there. Look how the green, what's on here? Yeah, there's definitely some crap in there. So let's just take this gear out. These gears, this orange one, these are the ones that disintegrate basically. But I'm gonna try to clean up around there, maybe with a little IPA. That little metal gear there, that's the actual shaft from the motor. So let's get a little IPA. I'll just try to clean this. It's definitely spinning now. It was sort of stuck. Make sure there's no hairs in there. Let's plug this back into here without the gear set cover on. And when I turn this on, that little motor should spin. I still have the blank disc in there, so it's gonna try to read it and then we should see that little cog spin there. Okay, it's spun. So that's a good sign. All right, so while this is doing this, where it's trying continually to eject, I'm gonna put a drop of this silicone oil right here on the shaft. Hopefully that kind of gets down in there and helps it lubricate. I'm actually gonna drop some on these gears as well. Help these turn nice and free. So this is the gear that disintegrates. For now, this gear seems okay. So I'm actually gonna reinstall this. Goes right on this shaft here. And I'm going to put a little bit of silicone lubricant on the middle black shaft and also right there. So when the motor spins now, it should spin that little gear as well. Okay, it's looking good. See, it's spinning the whole assembly there. Now I'm going to reinstall this white gear. That goes on here like that. Okay, and like we did, I'm just gonna add a drop of silicone on to the shaft there. Now at this point, this is all locked again. So before you put that gear on, make sure that this thing is pointing in the right direction. And then you have to reinstall the gearbox cover. You are unable to operate this with the cover missing because the cover is absolutely necessary for holding those gears in place. To reinstall, you put the metal under the two tabs, there and there. Just align it so you see the pegs poking through. And then you push down and it clips on. And again, this is the clip that breaks very easily, and I had to JB weld that on one of my motors. When we turn the computer on, that should now spin 360. And remember, this was the bad one that came on this disk drive. All right, notice it did not turn full 360. Let's see what happens on the next time. And this is the problem right now where it's not turning all the way. It has to do with inside here under this circuit board, there's a little copper contact that comes apart and moves together. There's a little eccentric gear thing, and that's what ensures that we get a full 360 degree turn. And notice it's not doing it, like it stopped on the side there. So I've had this problem plenty of times, and it usually just happens because, oh, so it kind of tried. Notice it sort of stopped and started there. Now the issue is, without desoldering these connections, there's no way to remove this circuit board and access the metal contacts. So what I find I do is, you can see in between that clip, there's a little gap there. I'll spray deoxit in there, and that gets deoxit onto those copper contacts. And if we remove the gearbox cover, we can then rotate this around and exercise it while deoxit is in there. And I have had really good success making these things work again. So let's remove this white gear here. So the white gear is out. So now this can turn freely again, and we're gonna spray some deoxit. Oh, I was actually wrong. I like to spray the deoxit right where these wires go in. There's a little bit of a hole. So I put the straw there, turn this upside down, and it's just blasted in there. And it starts to drip out the other side. So I know there's tons in there. And just turning this gear basically exercises the copper contact that's inside there. You can just feel the resistance where the contact is being pushed open right in this space right there. So the contact is currently closed in this part of the turning. So from there to there, it's closed. Opening and closing it a bunch of times seems to do the trick, at least I've found. Okay, so let's reassemble this. So remember, put that in the 12 o'clock position. Then we have to put this gear back in. There we go, that's now locked. Gearbox cover. All right, will it fix it? Will it go 360? So it's not working, but sometimes I let it run a whole bunch of cycles, and that kind of makes it come back to life. Damn it. I've had really good success with this, but apparently doesn't work every time. All right, you know what? I'm gonna go for broke. I'm just gonna spray this in here while the computer's on. Actually, you know what? I'm out of deoxit. Yeah, this can's empty, so I wasn't really getting any spray in there. I luckily have a brand new can here, Deoxit D5, my favorite stuff. Let's just spray this right in here. Oh yeah, that's good. Good old spray. Ah, still nothing. Okay, so I've removed the cover, and I'm going to turn this on. I took the gear out as well. So right now, when this is turned, while the power is on, and you have this turned to any other position but up here at the top with 12 o'clock, the motor should be running, and it's not. This is telling me that essentially those contacts are so screwy and dirty that even the deoxit did not help them at all. Okay, maybe. Hold on. Did you hear how it... Oh. This is more like it. So it's not running now. And when I turn it here, see it starts to spin. So let me eject the disk. All right, there's currently no disk in there, so the computer's not going to be trying to eject it. But when I turn this off 12 o'clock, this will start spinning. That's normal. That is what it should do. because basically this should be on all the way until it gets back into this position right here. The real good trick is spray deoxit in there, take the gear off with the power on, and just keep exercising this until it starts working. You need to get it till that motor starts running, where this is in any position other than the 12 o'clock, like that. Okay, I'm going to reassemble this and let's see if it ejects the disc. Let's reconnect this. Turn the Mac back on. Put the disc back in. Full 360. Oh yes, thumbs up. But we're not home free yet. I need to reinstall that and see if it even has enough torque to actually eject the drive. I've had it where it's mostly working like this, but because the contacts are bad, while it's in that full cycle, there's not quite enough torque for it to actually eject the disc, and it gets stuck halfway. Okay, here we go. The machine is ready. Let's put the disc in. Ah, see that? Not quite enough torque. Yeah, so that kind of sucks. So you might be thinking right now that the ejecting is slow because this thing is gummed up, but actually I'm going to switch over to this eject motor and let's see what happens. See that? Absolutely no problem. That's exactly how it should sound. So I know that my lubrication on the mechanism was perfect because this motor has no problem ejecting this. So unfortunately, that other motor just has rotten contacts in there. I suppose with the deoxit, as I run it more, it might get better. I don't really know. You heard while the motor was dismounted from the drive, it was working fine. And that's really because there's no load on it. Yeah, the load is only on the motor while it's trying to eject. So it's slow like it was, and we're just gonna try to eject several times. And that was the gear. The gear just broke. So that little tiny gear, that the orange one, just stripped. And here it's running right now. So the little bearing's not in the right position, so it's just constantly trying to eject. Luckily I have replacements. Let's take it out again. There's a little piece of the gear right there. Inside it's gear shrapnel. You can see there where the teeth just sheared right off. Well, let's get this out of here. So what's interesting is originally this had a little top section, a little gear on the top. That's gone completely. These just essentially, let me see if I can, oh yeah, look at that. So I shouldn't have reinstalled this. This gear is essentially just, there's no structural integrity to this gear at all. I guess it's maybe designed to shear. Maybe it's weaker than the other plastic white gears, because this is the one that always fails. So in here I have some spares. This is a seller on eBay. I'll put a couple links to the two sellers. I think there's currently 2 sellers on eBay that sell these. This is from one of them, and these are 3D printed from my understanding. So I have no idea how long these are gonna last, but I have used these in some of my other drives, and they do work, although they're kind of noisy. I guess the tolerances maybe aren't exactly the same on these replacement gears, and because of that, they make a little bit of noise when they run. They don't seem to work quite as smoothly. And then the other thing is, when you push it over this little black peg, it just doesn't turn very easily. It's almost like the hole is just slightly too small. I'm gonna add my drop silicone lube to this here. And as soon as I move this off to the side, that should start spinning. There it goes. Add a little bit more lubricant on there. And I'm going to reinstall the cover. Now, I found that it does that on my other drive. I've used one of these gears in one other drive before, and there's just a little bit more resistance in the overall assembly. With the original gear, when the little electric motor shut off, just the momentum of everything spinning kept it turning to about the 12 o'clock position. And you see there, it's ending up at about 11. Now, it doesn't affect things. Things still eject properly, but that's just something to know, that these gears don't fit quite right. It's also a little noisier than it originally was, and when I mount this in the drive and it's actually under force, it's much noisier. Now the torque problems we were having I think are going to be exacerbated by the gear being a little tighter than it was even before. We will see, although maybe that other gear was disintegrating and it was causing ejecting issues. I don't know. Alright, here's the moment of truth. New gear in the eject assembly. Will it have enough torque? You know, that doesn't sound great, but it's working. I can use this disk drive. So it's slow, but I'm going to call this a win. It's actually getting a little bit faster. You notice that? It's speeding up slightly. Let's do one more boot up test with the boot disk here. Sweet, it's working. Well, that was a long video. I didn't expect this drive to need quite so much work, but in the end it's kind of cool that you guys got to see pretty much all the problems there are with these drives, at least the ones that you regularly encounter, and hopefully you learned something from this video where you can service your own drives when they inevitably crap out like they all seem to do. Apple's decision to go with this automated Sony eject mechanism was really not great in the long term, because I have lots of PC disk drives that are just as old as these and they still work flawlessly without any need for cleaning or lubrication, and especially 3D printed eject gears. Anyhow, if you like this video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. If you didn't, you know what to do, thumbs down. Feel free to put your comments and suggestions down in the comment section below. Subscribe for more videos. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. All right, so just, whoops.